Okay, I believe we are live, and we'll see what's going on here. Give us a second just to make sure we've got the technology going right. All right, it looks like we are live. So we got a couple of people who are going to be straggling in. So just to let everybody know, I'm Jeffrey G. Mersace, the plain English attorney. I am an attorney in North Carolina licensed. I focus on estate planning and Medicaid planning, and I am a certified Medicaid planner. And I am here with some of our team members, and I'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves in just a few minutes. So just realize we got the chat available if you do have questions along the way. And that's the big thing, is this is going to be a Q&A session so that you can get some answers on how to bring Medicaid and basically care assistance planning into your practice without necessarily having to become the expert, the person who's going to guide and run everything, and having to have that corresponding knowledge base that you have to go through. It's almost like training for another profession if you're going to do it right, but that's if you're going to do it on your own. So this is going to be a way for the professionals who we've got tuning into this live stream. This is a way to differentiate yourself from a lot of other professionals in your community who are estate planners, financial advisors, tax planners. If they say, yes, I can do Medicaid planning, that doesn't mean the same thing or the same to the same extent as when we say that we're Medicaid planners, because we do things a little bit differently. We're not just looking one step ahead. We're trying to look 3 steps ahead. We're not just looking at qualification. We're looking at how can we save the family as much money as possible? How can we get you qualified for long-term care assistance through Medicaid and other programs, not just Medicaid, but other programs, and save as much as possible? Because the rules are out there. They're complex. They're confusing for a lot of people who don't live and breathe in these regulations all the time, every day. And it's kind of designed for your clients to just throw up their hands and go, okay, this is just too much. Let's just spend everything down. That's kind of what Medicaid is looking at. That's what they're hoping for. Right. So just to talk about a case that I'm currently working on, and how another Medicaid planner, a kind of top guy in that area of the state, they got mom qualified for Medicaid. Yeah, they did many years back. So that attorney created a power of attorney so that mom's husband, dad, had power of attorney. They shifted assets around so that mom had less than $2,000 and dad had less than, at whatever that time the community spousal resource allowance was. They only had one vehicle, and the deed was titled in a way that passed Medicaid's muster, which meant they left it exactly the way it was. Tenancy by the entirety, which is joint with the right of survivorship for a married couple. All right, well, the attorney didn't look anything beyond that qualification like we do. It's like, well, okay, what if dad passes on first? Well, now there's no backups in that power of attorney. How was dad's estate set up? Was dad's estate integrated into this whole process to make sure if he goes first, that mom wouldn't get kicked off of Medicaid? They didn't do that. In fact, dad's will was never changed, and it left everything that ended up in probate to mom. Okay. Oh, they changed some of the beneficiary designations on the retirement accounts, though. They left it a third to mom, a third to the daughter, and a third to the son. So now all of this money is automatically going to mom because dad did die first. And this is a shocking statistic that I've sometimes seen. 60% of the time, the caregiving spouse goes first. So they're gone. And now this was actually a more likely than not scenario, and the attorney didn't look at it at all. In addition to that, the house is now completely in mom's name, and Medicaid can put a lien against it. Now, that's just the legal and the financial implications of not looking several steps ahead. Another big thing that kind of differentiates the way we do things is we look at a whole wide range of areas when it comes to planning around Medicaid. It's not just the legal and the financial qualification. We also need to look at some of the nuts and bolts around the individual assets and make sure things are being done correctly the right way. So, this is where Mike can come in as our asset coordinator and look into some of these assets. And we have Dave, who's the care team leader. He helps us with making sure we've got the proper documentation, the proper medical diagnosis from the doctors, so that when the application goes in, they're medically also qualified for Medicaid. And he's got a geriatric care manager that works with him so that we can really get a handle on what are the things going on. And probably one of the more valuable things is making sure that we can tighten up and focus the facility search if that's what's needed for facility-based care, so that we're not running all over the place. Now, I end up telling people, if you need to find a facility for you, your spouse, or a parent, think about how many houses you would want to look at before you decided which house you were going to buy and move into. Multiply that by 4. That's how many facilities you should look at. Well, with part of what we do with the care team is we can weed out a lot of the facilities that aren't appropriate and help you narrow down your choices to just a couple. All right, so let me go ahead and turn it over to David Cole first, and then we'll get to Mike. So David Cole is our care team leader. So David, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with the team.
As you were describing uh, what we do, how we're a little different, it reminded me of when I first came into town 20 plus years ago. I uh, referred a case before I met you, Jeff, to another attorney and went with the client to have the meeting. The meeting was over with. A lot of the ideas about planning were discussed. And as the client left the office, outside the door was a rack of these business cards where the attorney said, well, yeah, here's pick some of these and call these people when you have questions about this or that. And I just, it struck me that, boy, that leaves people a lot of stress and questions to ask. So in working with you, Jeff, I'm glad we put together this team, which I kind of oversee, of first a geriatric care manager, Sybil, who has 30 plus years as a registered nurse and a licensed social worker, taught nursing, understands the aging process to be able to be a patient advocate and understand what the client and the family's looking for and provide options, and then working with a facility search person to be able to go help with, quite frankly, what I think is kind of like a real estate transaction, as you said. Finding that facility that has the big backyard, the nice kitchen, the in a good school district, has those things, the good food, good dining room activities, bingo night, movie night, and is close, location, location, location. Well, all of that, and which will accept Medicaid, which is a whole other issue. But to pull all that
Yeah.
together, we've got this team of people that can help with understanding what the care needs are, what the options are, including staying at home. Quite frankly, most people want to be at home. So let's explore that option also, if the family is able to do that or we're able to get the care. And so yeah, so it's looking at all those options, not just the nuts and bolts and the financial legal strategies to get qualified for the various benefits. And we also, of course, look at VA benefits for those that are veterans or widows of veterans, because we're also, both Jeff and I are VA accredited agents. Jeff's the VA accredited attorney. So we look at all that. We understand Medicaid. We want to not just say this is, we try to find out what the desires are and match that to what's available into the planning. So that's the care planning assessment team.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. And Mike, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit of what you do? Mike is the asset coordinator in our process.
Yeah. So about 7 years ago, when I met and started working with Jeff, he, introduced me to his business of care assistance planning as a certified Medicaid planner. And I actually have a pretty extensive background in Medicare and long-term care planning. And it's funny that a lot of times you talk with folks and they think Medicare or Medicaid is one of the same. um,
Yeah.
that's a big myth, right? Like, oh, well, my Medicare takes care of that, doesn't it? And well, no, that's a big surprise when they learn, no, Medicare is primary health insurance, but it does not cover custodial care. Uh, and skilled care is very limited as well. Uh, you're looking at maybe up to 100 days of skilled care. So what do you do after, right? Um, and as an asset coordinator, I take orders from both of y'all most of the time. You let me know what's on the table, and I look for opportunities to in those assets that may be owned, whether there are some long-term care benefits there that they can use to assist with, you know, planning for Medicaid, or if some of those assets may need to be uh, changed over to something that may work in line with a trust plan, which is the purpose again of getting Medicaid.
Oh, yeah. So it really sometimes can end up looking a lot like a puzzle, but we need to know what all the pieces are and how they function to make sure we're maximizing the plan and the strategy that we can put together. So this is how we end up working with a lot of other professionals. If they want to bring this type of practice and fold it into what they're doing, which happens quite naturally with a lot of estate planners, whether they're financial advisors, attorneys, accountants, and they work in that estate planning realm, and they do work with revocable living trusts and things like that. This is kind of a natural extension of protecting the family and making sure that the assets get where they're supposed to go, even though we need some long-term care planning. Just a story from when I was first starting out and didn't quite have a process of going through everything, which becomes a key thing. I ended up having a discussion with the daughter. She wanted to get Medicaid for dad, tried to look at everything at every angle. And she said, okay, well, yeah, I want your help. I want you to put together a strategy. All right. So I said, all right, well, what assets does he have? Oh, he has this, and he has this, and he has this. I go, okay, well, I'm thinking maybe we can put this piece here and do this. And then she said, oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, what about this? Like she was pulling out another card and putting it on the table. It was another piece of real estate. I'm like, well, okay, we can't do that. We got to sell this and do that. But wait a minute, you just said that we could do that. Well, whoa, no, no. You threw another puzzle piece in. Oh, okay. And then so okay, with this other thing, here's what we could potentially do. We'd have to do this and move this here. And it's like she pulled out another card. Well, what about this? I'm like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. So part of the process is trying to gather all of the assets and the information to make sure that we know exactly what we're dealing with. But this is the point that Mike was making. They don't always know exactly what they do have, and we may be able to discover some potential long-term care features in there, but this takes the whole working with the team. So part of what I've seen ends up helping a lot of people ease into this process is something that I put out there for free. Freemedicaidcourse.com has my book, The Long-Term Care Solution, and it's not going to be an extensive examination of how you do Medicaid planning. It's for the clients, but it runs through here's what the actual definitions and how the rules work around things like the 5-year look back period, gifting, what's the quote the snapshot date that Medicaid looks at to see what were your assets on that particular date when care was needed when they're doing the Medicaid application. So it helps clients understand some of those basic rules, and we put the extensive questionnaire that helps us get to where we're going. So how can we work with you if the clients are running through and looking through that book, the Long-Term Care Solution, again, it's online for free in free Medicaidcourse.com, and get us the completed questionnaire, now suddenly me and the rest of the team and you as professionals, we can bring you in on this discussion, talk about potential strategies, and then have the discussions with the clients on what are the main goals, what do they want to do, and what can we now put together in a coordinated strategy. And then we move forward from there, step by step. Are we going to need some legal documents? Okay, we can work with the attorney, with you as the attorney, or if you're a financial advisor, one of your attorneys. Now, the network that we are all kind of affiliated with in one fashion or another is called the Estate Planning Source. They're carrying the documents, so you don't need to have that local attorney develop all of the documents that we're talking about. It's already available as, quote, the toolbox for Medicaid planning through the Estate Planning Source. So we can all kind of coordinate and work together. So what's the other option? Well, you can go ahead and become the expert on Medicaid planning. You can also become the expert on all the different care facilities and what's out there. You can try to understand all of the tax implications instead of trying to bring in a tax professional. You can end up searching and going through all this stuff, but it's too much. I think it's too much. And this is why the team approach works really well. But we can work with you, and you can become part of the team for those particular clients. All right, so those main areas, yeah, there's legal, financial, tax, care, and also just the overall strategy that's going to take care of everything. And I guess that's one more point I want to make before we're opening everything up to whatever questions you've got, is it's not done in a vacuum. And I know that David, Mike, and I, we've encountered this quite a bit when we're talking about taking and moving and transferring assets into a trust, start the 5-year clock going, and we get pushback from the banks or the financial advisors. Oh, no, don't liquidate that. Don't move that. The big one was, oh, don't move your CDs into that trust. You're going to lose all of your accumulated interest. You're going to lose $3,000 of accumulated interest. Just wait 6 months. And then the CDs are going to come due. Okay, 6 months of private paying $9,500 a month for the care that was needed, rather than liquidating and moving those assets and foregoing the $3,000 of interest. That was made in a vacuum. With the team approach, you're looking at all of those factors. You don't want to just move an IRA into the irrevocable trust because of the potential tax implications, but maybe those tax implications weighed against the cost of care. That might still be the recommendation, but we get a tax professional to look at that. So it's a whole team process to make sure we're maximizing what we can retain, not just for the client, not just for the client and the spouse, but for what can get passed on to the next generation. So we're really kind of looking 3 steps ahead. All right. If you've got questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll address that. But in the meantime, Dave and Mike, is there anything that you want to add until we get some questions coming in?
Dave, do you want to go first?
You're muted, Dave.
Yeah.
So I was going to say good summary, but I think we want to say, legal documents, strategies, saving money is one thing. The other more expansive thing that we look at is what are the options for not only Medicaid benefits, but other resources through other government agencies like the Area Agency on Aging, Resources for Seniors, Enhanced Medicare, home health care, through Medicaid waiver programs. Yeah, what's available out there to combine with the legal strategies to, in fact, get access to those, whether it's covered under Medicaid or not. So some things are outside of Medicaid that ought to be considered and be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I know that, you know, particularly when it comes to things like veterans, there are a lot of potential benefits that either they don't know about,
Mhm.
or they're simply told by the VA, oh, you don't qualify, because
Mhm.
they're not actually giving an in-depth examination
Mhm.
and looking at all the calculations, whereas we do.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely. And I learned this through you, Dave. Like, every state, I mean, Medicaid is generally similar, but some states are more lenient towards income restrictions
Mhm.
for benefits. So, like you said, it's not necessarily just getting the Medicaid, but maybe there is some home health care options available.
Mhm.
Um, and, in a state that has less restrictions on the income that the household has.
Mhm.
I think the coordinating the assets is a big part of it, because you know there's tax implications to liquidating accounts, um, but if there's medical costs to offset that, then that may be the right asset that you want to use for that cost. Because if you're, the estate planning part of it is, your preserve where asset preservation planning is really what some of this is, and you want to make sure that the next generation or the spouse is retaining as much assets, but maybe also the assets that have less tax implications later down the road. So that's the big part of coordinating the assets with the estate plan.
Okay. All right. Well, while we're looking for questions from the audience, let me talk a little bit about some of the big misunderstandings around this. There are a lot of clients who think it's as simple as, well, yeah, we need to do Medicaid planning. Tell me what we need to do. What's the strategy before we even get a chance to look at the assets? They're kind of assuming that there's one way or one or two different ways that we're going to achieve the goal of qualifying for Medicaid, when that really isn't the case. It all really is very highly dependent, not just on how much they have in assets, but what type of assets are out there. Just in general, if you have an individual, that's going to be the easiest way to explain it, an individual who needs care. So the kids and dad are coming here, mom's already passed on. We need to get dad qualified for Medicaid. Here's the issues. Medically, he'll qualify. All right. Well, we've got the primary residence. You can keep that primary residence. Okay, he can have up to $2,000 in a checking account. He's got $1,900. Can only have one vehicle. Oh, yeah, he's got this one vehicle. That's it. Oh, and there's this tenth of an acre lot that he inherited. It's not really worth all that much. Maybe it's worth $10,000. Well, okay, he has two pieces of real estate. Only one of them can count as his primary residence where he lives. He's not going to get qualified, even though it's $10,000. Or in one case we had, it literally was worthless because it was basically on the side of a mountain, and it was totally you can't build anything on it, but it was still real estate. And we could prove it was worth like nothing, but it was still real estate, and Medicaid was denying the application. We had to get a cousin to buy it for $100 just so that they could qualify for Medicaid. So again, it was real estate. What about something like a retirement account? That's if you've got a spouse and it's the spouse's retirement account and they're over their community resource allowance. Well, okay, we're not going to necessarily just take all of that money and move it into an irrevocable family trust and start the 5-year clock on it. we could actually turn part of that into an income stream to the spouse, and now it's no longer an asset. So there's lots of different things that can happen, but it's highly dependent on the types of assets and what their value is. So there's no one particular plan.
Yeah, I'd like to add something real quick. Stepping back to the real estate. One case that we've worked on, when the family got to talking with us, they had already sold mom's primary home and spent all that money and tried to get a Medicaid, and Medicaid, they were still within the 5 year, about 6 months left from when they sold the property. And because they used the money to move mom into their house and provide her with sort of like an in-law suite and everything, Medicaid looked at that as like gifting the assets, where if they had just had someone who could help guide them, I imagine they would have been able to get Medicaid almost 5 years ago to pay for mom's care, and they could have kept the house in the family.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a lot of mistakes, particularly by do-it-yourselfers. Oh, I heard that you can do this, and so they go ahead and do it. And then when they file the Medicaid application, that's when they realize, no, that was a mistake.
Yeah, and I know we're getting close to November and December, and that's where you get those family dinners around the holidays, and then, oh, my cousin told me we could do this, and my brother said we should buy Bitcoin, but we should do this for mom. And those are where don't forget that if you're the professional working with your clients, keep them informed that, hey, your friend's advice or your cousin, your family member's advice may not be exactly the right advice.
Okay. All right. Well, we do have a question that came in from Courtney. Thank you, Courtney. And this is Tennessee. The mom and daughter own the house together. Not sure about survivorship yet. The daughter is already on Medicaid, and they want to preserve the house for the granddaughter. So is this, I'm wondering if this is a Medicaid health insurance thing as opposed to the daughter needing actual long-term care, but it could be. But in either case, they want this house to get down to the granddaughter eventually. We definitely would need to know more, but I think there's things that can end up being done. But what are some of the factors that you guys see in that?
Well,
I think we'd have, yeah.
in any case, the house is non-countable. You know, and in Tennessee's got some pretty liberal ability to make it non-recoverable. So I think the house at this point is a non-issue. But as you started out this presentation, better make sure you've got options lined up, so we don't know who's going to die first and who's going to need what.
Mm-hmm.
So look at those options. But for the time being, Medicaid, it's not going to affect Medicaid either for the daughter or the mom.
Right. And so that's the answer for that one. But like you said, currently, that's not going to affect Medicaid for either the daughter or the mom. We have to take a look at a couple of steps ahead for how can we make sure this gets down to the granddaughter in a proper way without tripping over some of the whatever the transfer rules may end up being. We'd have to take a closer look at it, but I definitely think there's something that can be done.
And you'd want to look at capital gains also, and the taxation, as it passes around. So I'll add that to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a technique that doesn't work in every state, and I have to put that as a big caveat because I know that this is going to be on YouTube and people are going to get to it and could potentially try to, quote, do it themselves. If you have the kids buy into a house with the right of survivorship and they only purchase like 1%, then they can end up inheriting that house and still get a 99% step up in cost basis. So it's like it's one child, mom needs care. In North Carolina, the child can buy the 1%. Now, mom is 99% and 1% with the son, right of survivorship. As long as son doesn't go first, mom passes on, son inherits the house, stays outside of probate, outside the lien. And if son turns around and sells the house the next week, 99% that mom owns still gets a stepped up cost basis. So, yeah, definitely taxes and capital gains taxes in particular are something we're looking at. Now, what if this were a state that didn't have and allow that right of survivorship and still allowed a potential Medicaid lien? It could be up to 99% of the house is vulnerable to that type of lien. And that's why you want to make sure we're looking and double checking what the rules are for that particular state. All right. So please, what other questions are out there? Please go ahead and put that into the chat. In the meantime, anything, David or Mike, you want to add to the discussion?
Well, well, I'm curious about the last question too. You said that the mom owns the house, and they want to make sure the daughter already has Medicaid, and the granddaughter is where.
Yeah,
Is that
the
correct?
question actually was mom and daughter jointly
Okay.
own the house,
Okay.
and
Okay.
not sure about the right of survivorship yet. So we could check into that a little more. But both of them are already on the house. But again, the stated goal is how do we make sure this gets down to the granddaughter,
Right.
not necessarily just mom or the daughter, but the granddaughter as well. Yeah, so it's that looking a couple of steps ahead that's also important. While we're waiting to see if we get another question in, I do want to talk a little bit about taxes, because everybody hates taxes. They hate taxes with a passion. But all right, if we have an IRA and that's causing Medicaid to not qualify, and the most common thing is that you've got a married couple and it's the spouse who's not going into the facility. They have an IRA and it's over the limit. What can be done? Well, we can pull the money out and put that into the irrevocable family trust, or use that money to pay for certain things or upgrades on the house, or whatever that particular strategy is. But we have to make sure we're balancing the pulling of that money out. In some cases, it actually works out better to take whatever that excess is and do something called an immediate annuity to get income going over to the spouse, because the spouse's income doesn't factor into the application. It's only the spouse who's going into the facility. Part of the deal with Medicaid is all of their income goes to the facility first. Medicaid pays the difference. But that doesn't count for the spouse. The spouse can have as much income as they need to or want to. And in fact, once the Medicaid application is in and we see what the assets are on that particular date, that immediate annuity, they can start saving some of that and building their assets up, because after there's a qualification, the spouse who's still, quote, in the community, they're not in the facility, their assets no longer count. Spouse that's in the facility, we have to make sure their checking account doesn't go over that $2,000 limit each month. So there is that separation. Most people don't realize that. They assume because the spouse's assets count in these calculations, that the spouse's income also counts in these calculations, and it doesn't.
I
All
have
right.
something. Oh, another question?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
we don't have a question yet. So go ahead,
Well,
please.
I'd say, come across scenarios where, your clients, um, well, a lot of times these conversations about Medicaid planning, or long-term care costs in general is when someone in the family is diagnosed with a health condition that's life-changing, right?
Yeah.
Mobility disorder, cognitive disorder. I mean, the list goes on. And you may think, well, my clients are too wealthy to actually look at Medicaid as an option. They just have too much money. But that may be true to some point from what I've learned is like, well, maybe the one spouse that's been diagnosed can't qualify for Medicaid now, but with the right type of estate planning or what we call care assistance planning, you can put pieces into play that at a point in the future, that spouse could be entitled to those government benefits
Yeah.
and not have to worry about spending the $12,000 to $15,000 a month out of their own assets, even if they are well off.
Well, yeah, I think that's kind of an important thing when we talk about the way that we're doing Medicaid planning versus a lot of others. We are looking at what if the spouse ends up needing care as well, and how does that incorporate into that overall plan? So sometimes one of the recommendations is, well, okay, we need to get one spouse qualified. They have a primary residence, and it's a primary residence between them, either tenancy by the entirety, it's all in one spouse, or it's all in the other spouse's name, the community spouse. Well, we can transfer the interest of the spouse that's going into the facility to the other spouse, and it's still okay, it's their primary residence. After qualification, we can take the house and move it into the irrevocable property trust that we've already set up so that it starts the 5-year clock for the spouse in the community in case they need care. So we're looking those steps ahead and we're taking action to actively start the 5-year clock for that client. So yeah, we're looking at a lot of different things, and in particular, saving everything for the family. Because I can tell you, and David, I know that you talk about this all the time. The kids just want what's best for the parents, but the parents, who ultimately really are the clients, they don't just want to get care. They want to preserve what they worked their lives for and get it down to the next generation. And that's really the goal. And that's like one of the things that really kind of upset me about the way that other Medicaid attorney got mom qualified but completely ignored dad and the kids. It's That's really what they wanted. What mom and dad wanted is to make sure that what they end up leaving behind is going to be there for the kids, not just the qualification.
Yeah, rarely do we perceive that a child is looking at for mom or dad's money. It's always about what's best for mom and dad. We want to, that was their money. We want to use that to care for them. Well, yeah, that may be true. But again, if you talk to the claimant, the mom and dad, they abhor the thought that every dollar they earn through a lifetime of work is going to be poured into the ground or into the facility. They've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes for these benefits. They might as well understand how to get at them. Many times the
Right.
attitude is, oh, that's for the poor, that's for the destitute, that's where you go to get lousy care. No, no, no. Look at the material you have in the book, Jeff. Look, these are benefits you earned by either your service to the country, like for veterans benefits, or by the taxes you paid. You might as well at least understand what's possible to preserve that. So, as you say, you don't die broke.
Right. Well, and let me come back to that in the facility search and the attitudes of Medicaid. But one thing I would just want to make clear, because we are working this live stream really is for professionals so that they can get their questions answered on how they can bring Medicaid planning and practice to their practice. A lot of the professionals in our network are financial advisors who have helped their clients build up their assets, sometimes over decades. They don't want to see all of that hard work that they did in working with their clients get diminished 10, 12, or $15,000 a month at a time until it's gone, if there is a way to preserve it. If you're an attorney and you worked with your clients setting up, say, a revocable trust to avoid probate, to protect the assets from having all of these unnecessary expenses and costs and delays when everything transitions to the next generation, you don't want to see all of that also get drained so that there is no legacy that's being left behind. This is a way to incorporate those wishes, maintain as much of that wealth as possible so it goes to the next generation, but do it in a way that's going to get the care that they're entitled to under the Medicaid and other programs that are out there. And so now, David, I'd like to push it back to you just because you always end up describing it well, that just because it's a Medicaid facility doesn't mean it's poor care. In fact, we've looked at facilities. There are some of these $12,000, $13,000 a month facilities that are actually pretty bad with the care that they're providing. And there are some facilities that are Medicaid only that do really well. So give us a couple of words on that, please.
Well, especially since COVID, the landscape has changed, and finding staffing is, they're not the most highly paid workers in the world anyway. And going online to the CMS, the government website, and looking at the reviews and all that, isn't necessarily going to give you an accurate picture of what's there. And I think that's where Sybil comes in, is to be able to help you understand what to look for, and to also dialogue with the staff there. But things change. What was a bad review 2 months ago could have changed, and again, the turnover and all that. So yeah, it's one thing to have all the nuts and bolts. Okay, you qualify for Medicaid. It's another thing to find that facility where mom and or dad are going to be comfortable and happy, and not turn to the kids and say, why are you doing this? Why did you put me in this lousy place? What kind of daughter are you? I went through that. So no, the legal, the financial side is one thing. Making sure you've got the appropriate, acceptable care is pretty tough nut. It really rounds out and completes the plan. So, and that is a moving target, but that's what we have our geriatric care nurse, social worker, facility placement people for, to, after the work has been done or while that's being done, to be able to find that, or home health care for that matter. Because again, most people do want to stay home if it's possible. So looking at all those rounds out the plan.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would say, David, your team is good at helping weed through some of the incorrect information that the facilities might also be given the families. Like, oh yeah, you can come into our facility and Medicaid will eventually help you, and then that might not actually end up being the case at all.
Well, just remember, the community business office and workers have a different agenda and different goals than the family or the claimant. I mean, their goal is to take all your money, quite frankly, put it harshly.
Yeah.
The goal of the family is to preserve the money. And so, yeah, you're going to get different answers. Remember who you're getting advice from. Best to get advice from someone that represents your interest.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen where the doctors have signed off on a patient needing full skilled care, and then the care coordinator at the facility is saying, well, we're not going to you can't stay here unless you start paying right away. But it's like, no, actually, because of this doctor's recommendation, we have some loopholes or some additional options available to us, but they're not disclosing those to the clients. are the patients. They're like, no, you got to write us a check.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So we haven't gotten any additional questions in. So I think we could just, any final comments before I go ahead and give the phone number for the Care Assistance Center if they want to end up trying to work with us. We're happy to have a phone call where I can review, here's how we work, and then eventually bring him into the team, or bring us as the team into your practice with the clients that you want to help. So any kind of final comments, David?
I think I think we were talking about our role is to educate, guide, and you know, make sure that the advisor is providing as many options as possible and really
Mm-hmm.
differentiating themselves in their space as to saying this is the value added that we bring to what we do for you.
Yeah. And attorneys as well.
Hmm.
Okay. Mike, any final words?
Yeah, I always like to say one thing I heard you say a long time ago is like, encourage your clients to not be scared to talk to you as a professional about this thing, because it could be yeah, there could be a cost for the service, but the cost of not engaging, it could be far more tremendous than hiring the professional.
Yeah. When you really pull out a calculator and you start looking at ten to $12,000 per
Month.
month to pay for care until your money's gone, it kind of makes it worth getting a professional team around you to make sure that you save as much as possible. And really, in a lot of cases, we're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars for the family by having the right kind of plan in place. All right. So I do not see any additional questions, but one of the things we'll do is we will follow up with everybody who was originally on our list for this live stream. And this is, of course, going to go out to YouTube. It's already up there as a live stream. We'll make sure that we're sending out the link to the professionals we originally invited in for this. And the way to get a hold of the Care Assistance Center to see if this is something that you want us as a team to help integrate into your practice with you, help with you and your clients, so that you're kind of becoming a part of the team for your clients, give us a call at the Care Assistance Center. That's my office. So my staff will be picking up 919 518 8237. Again, 919 518 8237. And that's the Care Assistance Center. And we'd be happy to talk to you further about it. All right. So I will say to you as the professionals, the same thing that I say to my clients. Please stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life. And whatever you do, make it a great day. Thanks for being here.
Hmm.